All right. Well, welcome everyone to a special edition of Women of Woodworking Wednesday. I am Katie Thompson, and just a quick image description of me. I am a Caucasian woman. I'm sitting in my studio on a black couch. I have shoulder length, big curly blonde hair, and a white wall behind me with some abstract art. And I'm really excited to have Laura Petrovich-Cheney with us. And Laura, will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I'm absolutely honored. I am in Marblehead, and Marblehead is known as the territory of the Namkeg Native American tribe, and I would like to honor them by mentioning that. To give you a visual, I am a Caucasian woman, 53 years old, with long red hair. It's sort of COVID-ish right now. And behind me is my work, which is houses, which is a 3-inch by 4-inch series of houses with just a door and a roof in a varying amount of colors. I am sporting my Women of Woodworking t-shirt, which is dark green, and I have a thermal shirt underneath because it's cold.
So how many inches of snow did y'all get this week?
Actually, we got rain. We probably got about an inch and a half of snow, but we got a rain. But that's along the coast, inland. I heard something like 12 inches, 13, but how much did you get?
None. Here in South Carolina, we're excited. In like 2 weeks, we have a 40% chance of snow on like a Saturday. And even though it's probably not going to happen, the fact that it's even like on our 2-week outlook is exciting to us.
That's right. You get like an ice storm.
We do get a lot of ice, and I'm about an hour in from the coast. So whenever it does ice, there's this huge bridge in Charleston called the Ravenel Bridge. And it's kind of become a joke between me and like my journalism buddies and stuff, is like, is the bridge open? Is it, because if it shuts down, it's like Charleston's kind of split in half. So we don't get a whole lot of snow down here, but well, I'm glad that you're able to join me again for this week. Did you call that a mural that was hanging behind you?
No, it's one of my sculptural pieces. I make wood quilts. So, it's funny, they hang on the wall, they're wall supported, but I still consider them sculpture.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your work and your process?
Sure. My process started because I was a quilter, and I went to graduate school, and I was making these giant tree trunks. And it started because I was a painter. I went to graduate school to kind of get beyond that. I mean, if I was happy being a painter, I wouldn't have put the time and the money going back to school in my 40s. So my professor, Paul Hubbard, suggested that, why don't you try to consider building something, building your frames, building your substructure. Let's go downstairs in the wood shop and let's try our hand at this. Well, I get to the bandsaw and I am shaking and sweating. And he's like, and hyperventilating probably. And he's like, before we do anything, we need to calm down because you're shaking so badly, you'll probably run right into the blade. So I'm like, really? That bad? You could see it? I was scared to death of these things. And then I had some practice and I got better. I didn't, freak out. And I said to him, I don't think I ever want to be afraid again. That felt so good, getting over that fear, that I like these endorphins. What else can I do? So I learned the chop saw and I learned the table saw, and I said, this is really good. What else is out there? And he said, well, there's always chainsaws, jokingly. And of course, my master's thesis, then I was using a chainsaw. But the cool thing about the woodworking community, unlike, well, I suppose a lot of communities are like this, but the really great thing about the woodworking community is everybody loves to share. You can get 3 woodworkers together and you get 4 opinions on how best to cut something. And so I learned how to use a chainsaw from a tree guy. I learned how to use other things from another wood sculptor. I learned about gluing from a furniture maker. I learned about how to build different kinds of, better kinds of glue from a boat builder. I mean, the community is so rich and so supportive, and it's really fantastic. And I like that a lot about the woodworking community. But to go back to graduate school, so I'd been doing these things with tree trunks and tree logs, and every time I went on my walk, I pulled something out of the forest or along the beach. Well, one day after a nor'easter, I found these two beat up, washed up boats, and one was turquoise and one was orange. And I hauled them into my studio, and they sat in my studio for about a year. And about a couple months before graduate school, before graduating, one of my professors said, you know, we're so sorry that you never did anything in fabric. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, fashion designer. I was a fashion designer for 10 years. He's like, we thought you'd be doing like fabric sculptures. And I thought, well, of course you give me this great idea now. But I get that I was probably so excited about the chainsaws that I forgot there's other things in life. So after I graduated from school, I knew I had to do something with these boats, and I knew I had to do something with fabric. And like most women, you know, we're tasked with the daily chores of grocery shopping and the cleaning. But the good thing about that is that's when the ideas can come in, you know. And I'm in the grocery line, and I see this magazine, quilting, decorating with quilts or something. Now, I'd been quilting since I was 17. And I picked it up out of curiosity because, hey, I enjoy making a quilt. What are they doing with this? And I open it up, and there is this quilt that's orange and turquoise. And I thought, oh, wow, I could build this quilt out of those boats that have been sitting around now for 2 years. And I did. And this was really fun because I kept building, but I was running out of wood, and I was building, and I was getting some recognition, local recognition at a little show here and there, and sold a piece or two. And then Hurricane Sandy hit, and now I'll never ever run out of wood because I lived through that hurricane. I collected the wood, the dresser drawers, the cabinets, the cedar siding, screen doors. I was able to collect it because I lived through it. We were right on the coast in Asbury Park, and my parents had a house down in Seaside, New Jersey. I had a brother-in-law that lived in Monmouth Beach, and I could just go everywhere. And again, the woodworking community really helped out because the contractors and the construction guys that I would talk to about how do you best use these tools also were my friends. And they said, oh, we're tearing down this house. You should come by. Oh, I saved this door for you because it was pink. So the community really helped me as well find the material. So it wasn't just this like, you know, solo artist collecting the wood and stuff. The community was great. And I think that's important to always recognize that too. So, you know, my husband would come home from work and they'd be like kitchen cabinets on the front on the front yard. And he's like, oh, somebody dropped something off for my wife. I mean, and they lived through a hurricane and a demolition. So it wasn't like they were dropping them off to be used. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's just so fascinating. And even looking at the sculpture that you have behind you, I can tell that you honor and are very passionate about honoring community in your work. And I know before you had said you don't paint any of the pieces, you just use what you find, those colors. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? That we live with so much color, that there is that much color in the world. This quilt actually, like the yellow kitchen cabinets, you know, a red little bookshelf, blue kitchen cabinets, some other blue dressers. It's just crazy. And this pattern is from the Missouri quilt, the Missouri Star quilt fabric. She's this really fun quilter out in Hamilton, Missouri. And she has these wonderfully fun and very informative YouTube videos on how to make quilts. So quilting is very accessible to somebody that would like to learn. And I saw these and I thought, ooh, I could do that. Because Hurricane Sandy happened so long ago, 2013. And I thought, why am I still doing this? What is it that still draws me to the salvaged wood from a natural disaster? Sure, it's a commentary on how we deal with the superstorms, but still that's so far removed. So I thought, but I lost, you know, I lost my childhood home. My parents' house was destroyed. Mine was damaged, but theirs was destroyed. And there's some history there with that as well. that during the repairs of the home, my dad died and my mother followed him a couple months later. So, I was thinking about home, and I was thinking about the Italian lockdowns. This was about January of 2020. So I was listening to that and regurgitating some ideas about home and what it meant. And, are we going to be locked down like the Italians? I can't imagine that happening in this country. And I started to make these houses, and I needed an easy pattern. And so I went on her YouTube and picked this up, and it started just like 6 of them. And then it started 12 of them. And then I thought, well, go big or go home, pun intended. So this is 4 feet by 4. I should really name it that, go big or go home. But I named it Homesick. Homesick because I was homesick for my childhood home, and those memories and that loss. But homesick too because I made this in the summer when we were all locked down. Actually, in the spring into the summer. So, but like I said, it's 4 feet by 4 feet, and it's quite huge and quite heavy. So,
I bet. But what a wonderful commentary on home and family, and thank you for sharing the background of that. I mean, hearing kind of the story of inspiration. I just love that personal connection that you get with artists and makers and their work, and it shows. I mean, it just exudes that, and especially after Hurricane Sandy, I know a lot of people really lost, like you said, lost everything. And down here in the South, we're kind of used to hurricanes, but that was also kind of a freak thing. It just seemed, it just was just so bizarre. And to see someone be able to literally pull the pieces of that and pull it back together and make such a beautiful work of art with that. Wow. I'm really moved and inspired by that. So I'm really glad we were able to redo this so I could see this piece and you can tell me about it. So all of your pieces are very bright and colorful. Do they all follow like a particular quilt pattern? How do you go about starting, if you're just starting a new piece fresh, how would you get started?
That's a really good question. And I'm so glad I'm doing this in my studio, not my office, because I can do show and tell. So most of my pieces are kind of riffs on traditional quilts and not traditional quilts. So you can see here, this is a small 24-inch by 24-inch board that has been primed. And I start in the center in this piece, and it's just a basic triangle, a 45-degree triangle that's based on a square that's based on a grid. And you can see here in the lines that it's going to grow. But, I'll figure out how wide I want them. Maybe I'll follow, a certain pattern, 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, or, maybe I'll go wacky at the end. But the intent is at every, corner, there will be the angle and then the solid pieces in between. And what's really cool about the salvaged wood is I don't know if you can see that, but there's a lot of undulation in the wood thicknesses. So I have real skinny pieces like from cedar, and then I have really tall pieces from, at the moment, God only knows what. And I prime the board with another color, because sometimes, working with salvaged wood, I had a piece today that bowed, and even when I cut it, the bow was still there. Now I could cut it in half and have split it, but I really needed it long. But it does this kind of funny thing because it, lived through so much. So there's always little spaces in between, and I like a little bit of breathing room. So I want that dark, so I'll paint it black or dark gray. So if you see into it, it's not white and reflective. So they're primed and then painted and then I glued. And so this is how they start, like this. And they're just all riffs of whatever quilt I feel like at the moment, Mm-hmm. Sometimes they follow traditional quilt patterns. Sometimes I've done so many quilts that I can kind of make up some ones. Here's another finished one. This one's a little heavy because it's 30 by 30. Whoa, it's a little heavy. And
that is amazing.
I hang it on a cleat. you know, but not all of them are heavy, but this one in particular is. It has a lot of floorboards in it, like oak floorboards. So that causes it to be heavy. And that's what these, this green is, this old green painted oak floor. And there's some more flooring in here. So yeah, it's really fun to work. You know, it's so crazy how like a cedar could be so light, and then an oak floorboard could be so heavy. And I'll even use sometimes the particle board is real heavy too. I never try to use womanized, obviously, because of the chemicals in that. So I try to use the natural wood or plywood or something. So, yeah.
What kind of glue do you use to, it has to be pretty strong, I'd imagine, to adhere your pieces.
It is. When I first started doing them, the pieces popped. And I was like, oh man, I was sanding them, I'm gluing them, I'm painting them. And I was having such a hard time. And I decided, okay, what is the wood? Let's go back to what was this? And it was the boats. So I figured, okay, who builds boats? You know, let's go to West Marine. Let's go to, because there was no boat building shop in Asbury at the time. There was some much further along. But I figured West Marine, you know, I'll drive up to them. I don't know if you know what they are. They're boating supplies.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, look, I'm repairing this wood boat. I just, you know, kind of told tale, because if I explained what it was, they just, you know, walk me right out the door. And I said, I need to put the wood back together. What do you recommend? And he said, you know, a 2-part resin. It's expensive, and there's been, you know, when I've given lectures across the country, people have said, oh, that's chemicals, you shouldn't use that, blah, blah, blah. It's a solvent. It happens, you know, all glues are solvents. Occasionally I will mix it with a wood glue, you know, your traditional, I don't know, the Titebond. Yeah, sometimes I'll use that, but I like the 2-part resin, again, because the wood is salvaged. The moisture comes in, the moisture goes out. It's just crazy. There's no consistency to it, but that allows the consistency with moisture. So now I've given away all my secrets.
Well, I mean, that's how I know West Marine is. We use probably the exact same epoxy. My husband Joseph, he got started building wooden sailboats. That was his first foray into woodworking. So now that's all he uses, because it's so strong. And so that's why I asked, because I thought, man, those things are heavy. So it would have to be an epoxy or some super glue to get that to stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, too, where you show them in a gallery, not all galleries are wonderfully climate controlled. I've had some fun things happen when I've taken it into an electric heated with sun-filled gallery, and I come back and I'm like, whoa, what happened there? And then, you know, altitude changes it. Wood is this ongoing, fascinating, still living, still what I would call breathing element that we're working with as woodworkers. And I love to hang out and talk to the old-time woodworkers to see, what do they do about warping? What do you guys do here? You know, every opportunity I get to go onto a Zoom that talks about somebody that's been doing it for 50, 60 years, I want to sit down and pick their brain. Mm-hmm. Usually they're men. I know someday there will be women. Someday somebody will be picking my brain when I'm 80, I hope. But right now, they're mostly, you know, old woodworkers or, you know, furniture makers. And they're the ones that I like to get that knowledge from, because wood is living. And all woodworkers have a problem with warping and changing and movement and all that fun stuff. And I think that's one of the draws to go back into wood. It's like, how can I manage that? How can I learn from that? What is the wood teaching me? And it's really fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a more dynamic relationship between the maker and the materials. At least as far as like what I have done as an artist, I love woodworking for the exact same reason. You know, to me, it never dies. It's never completely done, you know, until you know, burn it or something like that. But even then, that's another technique that can bring out a beautiful side of wood. And it is a very traditional technique as well. So you had mentioned it, and I had actually discussed this last night on our Q&A, just about how accessible the craft is. And you had also mentioned that about quilting. And so I love that you have gone down the direction that are really kind of the people's crafts, so to speak. There's, always been woodworking. Back in the day, you didn't have good blankets. You had to make your own quilts, and they were treasures, and they still are for a lot of people. So I love that the style of your work. It's like watching a puzzle with all the pieces fit together to hear your story and see what you're working on now and the meaning behind that. So I'm just so thrilled that I was able to have you back and to learn these things. So are you only working with materials from Hurricane Sandy now, or do you do kind of from other reclaimed sources, I guess?
Yeah, everyone's always curious about that. I'm not a storm chaser. I primarily deal with Hurricane Sandy only because the material has meaning to me. If I were to go somewhere else, I would be picking through someone else's life that I didn't have the connection with. Even though I have the empathy and the understanding of what they'd gone through, it's not the same. I felt a little touristy. However, I was invited to come down to the Gatlinburg, Tennessee, at Aramount Craft in Tennessee after they had their 2016 fires. And I did collect some of that wood. And that was very interesting to work with burnt wood as opposed to wood that had survived a flood or a hurricane, because it became so fragile, like very thin glass. I don't differentiate the Gatlinburg wood or the Hurricane Sandy wood or the subsequent nor'easters that I've collected some pieces, or even the pieces that I've collected off the street. When I see a dresser outside that happens to be a certain color that I need, I will pick that up. So I don't say, oh, this is only trash, this is only Gatlinburg, this is only Hurricane. They all get piled in. But the firewood, the burnt wood, is just so fragile and so messy to work with. But it's just incredible, the differentiation between burnt and drowned wood. I much prefer the hurricane wood, even though it warps and moves the wood differently. The fragility of that Tennessee wood was just really tough to work with. But yeah, I have enough wood from Hurricane Sandy to last several lifetimes. So
Wow. So yeah, no shortage of material there.
No.
So
to give you some idea, my studio is above my garage. My garage, which is a one-car garage, is filled with wood. And then I have about a bedroom plus storage unit filled head to toe with wood.
So yeah, you've got plenty. Plenty. So no, and I again love hearing the personal connection behind it. And sunken wood, that's something that we get a lot of down here, being in the swamps. And we actually live not on the lake, but on Lake Marion here in South Carolina. And it was a man-made lake. And one of the towns that was flooded in the process was a big sawmill town. They, milled cypress, and whenever they went to flood the lake, they tied all these logs down with these metal chains and, flooded the place. Well, after 70, 80 years, the metal rusts and breaks and these beautiful logs pop up. But it was definitely a learning experience, first of all, for the purposes of fine furniture. We would have to let it dry for, 3+ years before we would even be able to touch it. So I'm really interested to hear, is some of the wood you work with, do you have to let it I know now it's been since 2013, but when you salvage wood and things like that, do you ever have to go through a drying process or do anything to the wood at all, or you just kind of let it chill and then work with it when it's ready?
Yeah, I just kind of let it chill. I mean, obviously I'll bring it in. I'm not collecting it in a rainstorm. So if I find a dresser on the side, that goes right in. But it's still amazing. If I haven't been to my storage unit in a while and I unlock it, I could still smell the ocean. like it still smells salty. And that is so incredible to me that after all these years, I can still smell the beach. And it's really not as strong, but again, it has to be a little cooler. I mean, it has to be a little bit, because then I guess the wood starts to breathe a little bit more. It's just incredible, you know?
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's really fascinating. Wow.
yeah,
All
that
right.
salt smell, that beach.
It's
So,
just sunken right in there. Wow. Um, so I think I'd asked you this question last week, but and you had showed me a piece that you're working on, but what are you working on at the moment, project wise?
I finished up a huge commission, and it's 36 by 60 inches. Now I've done 60 but I've never done such a large rectangle shape, and it's a site-specific commission. And I just finished that up, so I'll be delivering that on Sunday. And piece is probably going to go. I'm having an exhibit there, an alumni exhibit in June at Moore Court, and then in the fall, I have an exhibit at the New England Quilt Museum in Lowell, Massachusetts, a local exhibit. And I'm just finishing up in, I think, 10 days at the Toledo Museum for the quilt show there, the Radical Quilts and Social Change. So that piece will be returning home.
That's so cool, because you could be, like you said, in a quilt exhibition, you could be in a woodworking exhibition. I mean, it's just really neat to see all the different medias that you've married together here. And I know quilting, kind of the quilt woodwork, was a little bit of a trend there for a little while, but yours is just so different and so unique in your own. And it has very much, and I definitely mean this in a positive way, a very inspirational folk art aspect to it. And hearing your story behind it, I mean, that's why I can see it. It's very, like you said, rooted in community, rooted in feelings, rooted in your experience. And I love that we're getting the opportunity to hear this from you. So
Thank you.
I did ask you last time we talked about things you would like to see more for women in the woodworking community. So I know this is a redundant question, if you don't mind answering again, but I really loved your answer. So please, by all means, tell us something you'd like to see more of for women in the woodworking community.
I sort of alluded to it earlier in the conversation where I said, for me to find deep experience, I'd like 50 years of woodworking, I had to go and talk to men. And I hope that at some point that women have this long and deep appreciation that have been in the community for this long, and that we're seeing more on the covers of Woodworking magazine. And I think, the woman who inspired me to do this piece, she had a fight to take shop. And she's not that much older than me, but she had to really push to get into the shop class. That's really a shame. I don't think education should be gender biased. If a young man wants to go into sewing and cooking, why not? Why does it have to be, the girls' classes and the boys' classes? If a girl wants to do automotive repair, so let her. Why hold that back according to your gender? And I think those things are changing. And as younger women get into the field, I think I'd like to see more of that, more articles about women in these magazines and women with this equipment, and not just like pinup girls with the equipment either, but real, true woodworking women, and to have these conversations and to acknowledge them. And I think that's really important, because I think my story could bring somebody else out and say, well, I can woodwork. And I imagine all these women that fought to get into that shop, how much of their lives would have been different, if they had this open to them, or the opportunity existed. And I remember, my father showed my brother how to use all these tools. And my brother has no interest in it, but I would have loved to. I remember being a little kid, building Legos, working with popsicle sticks, 3D paper stuff, not paper dolls, but, building these paper villages. And the idea of building was great. And my father I remember, God, I can't believe I just remembered this. I wanted a dollhouse so badly, but not a finished one to play with. I wanted one to build. And my father was so sweet. They went out and they bought me one built so I could play with it right away. I'm like, you're kidding me. I wanted no interest in playing with dolls. I wanted to build the thing, right? So, you think about that, and it was, what message was that? He did it generally out of kindness because he thought that was the intent, but we really need to honor the things that women want to do and not put gender labels on them. I think it's just destructive. So,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. Exposure and education, especially for children or teenagers, younger people, is huge. You can't even imagine what all is out there. And so being exposed to as many different things as you can is really important. And I agree with you, the gender bias, and that's something that hopefully we'll see less of as the times change. But, there's no doubt that there is this underlying layer of sexism that it goes completely throughout woodworking. What I think sets woodworking aside from other industries that have to deal with such a patriarchal foundation is that it is that communal aspect. So you do hear of women that are considered masters in the woodworking community. All of the male woodworkers look to her for her expertise in something, but she's not going to be the one on the cover. She's not going to be, Mrs. Popular or whatever. And I hope that starts to change. I look at women like my good friend, Mary May, who is just world-class carver and has just built her own unique space doing carving, creating an online school. She's really been a pioneer in a lot of different ways for the woodworking community. But, I couldn't tell you if I've ever seen her on a cover of a magazine or something like that. So, I agree with you. It's going to be more than just like, oh yeah, we're going to do better. It's like you have to make a concerted effort. And that's part of the reason why I do this project, is to pull women out of their shops and share their stories. Because then one of the number one things I hear feedback wise from, this project or classes I teach from other women is, now I feel like I can do this too. And you had said that too, we're empowering women to say, I can do woodworking. I can, finish my furniture program here at the school. I'm not alone. I'm not the only person in here. And that's what's really so important. And that's why doing things like this, there's got to be someone, I guess, to talk about woodworking and create those platforms. And I'm just so honored that I somehow managed to facilitate the community creating this wonderful space. I don't even feel like I can say, yes, I made this, because I feel like it's all of us, and it's that communal spirit.
But you spearheaded, and in the spearheading of this communal opportunity to talk to woodworkers, to listen to other woodworking women, you've provided that platform. And I think that's so important, that women support other women woodworkers, and we go see other women woodworkers, their art exhibits or their craft exhibits, and have this dialogue. So, you're really spearheading our community where we can come together and begin to have one strong voice. Because again, it is community. And if we don't build it, it won't exist. So thank you so much for taking the opportunity to speak with so many of us different woodworkers, because there's so many different kinds of woodworking, and it's nice to hear that,
Yeah, that's true. And thank you for the kind words. And, I had to get creative whenever I, figured I couldn't be in the shop as much as I wanted to be, and to do all of the traditional woodworking I wanted to do, but I knew I had a way with words. So I figured, hey, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it. So, but again,
I'd love to see you apply for grants and get some funding for this and go big with it, like maybe a conference or something huge, that would just be amazing. Because I know that there's grant money. Of course, applying for a grant is like a full-time job, but it would be so wonderful to see this take off, and for you, and really make something of this.
Well, I really appreciate that. And, of course, I'm thinking of ways, how can I just get more women involved? How can I expand this? How can I, um, just keep making things happen? And I am really excited, and I hoped you'd received the email. I think you were on the list. You should have been. With the Furniture Society, we're
Yeah, I
starting
saw
to
that.
do the monthly affinity group. So, it's small steps, one thing at a time, but none of this would be successful if I didn't have support from women like you and everybody else that has taken the time and made the effort to come on here and share their experiences and share their expertise. I'm asking out of the kindness of my heart, and y'all are here because you care about the community and care about other women and supporting other women that much. So thank you. And, on that note, how can other people see your work, get involved, get in touch with you? How can people network with you?
Instagram, that's how you and I met. Instagram's always really good. I'm on Facebook, but Facebook is always kind of funny. I'm trying to get out of Facebook professionally and just keep it to my family. I like Instagram. So you can find me at the big name, Laura Petrovich-Cheney.
I love it.
Yeah, I didn't want to give up my identity, but I wanted to honor my husband, so I kept both. Kind of a big mistake sometimes when you have to write it all out. Or you could email me, and I kept this easy, at Laura Cheney. You can visit my website at lauracheney.com, which is easier for spelling. And now that Liz Cheney's back in the news, it's spelt the same way, but there's no relation. It's so much easier. When he was vice president, I'd say the same thing.
Like,
Cheney,
yeah.
like the vice president, you can spell it, but no relation,
That's funny. Well, awesome. Well, again, Laura, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.
Anything you need, please reach out. And again, she gave you your website, and you can follow her on Instagram. And to get involved with Women of Woodworking Project, just use the hashtag Women of Woodworking on Instagram. You can get your wood
swag.
goods.
You got to get the swag.
Yes, we've got an online store. I'm trying to think of new merch, because like the beanies and the shirts and stuff, like everybody's like really loved. And I'm like, what about like maybe a coffee mug or something like that? I'm sure a lot of us drink a lot of coffee in our shops, so I'm going to be coming up
cup with a lid for the sawdust. Very important. Has to be a lid, because let me tell you, I come out of here and I'm like, thin layer everywhere. Glad I have that lid on my coffee to-go coffee mug. No matter what filtration system you have, there's always that thin layer everywhere.
I know, and you can tell like how pressed you are on a project, by counting how many cups of exposed coffee you've had. You're like, oh, it's just a little bit of dust. I've got to keep going.
One day we should talk about injuries too, because I'm like I sanded my finger the other day and I'm like really suffering from it,
Oh no, that's the worst.
That's a whole other conversation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That could be like a whole session in the affinity group is like, all right, how did we get hurt and what should you not do?
Right.
What did I do that you should not?
Your hand is just a little bit the wood is too wide for your hand. Use both.
Yeah.
Don't say I can squeeze. It's only going to be a minute. Oh,
man, that's how you end up getting hurt. So
that's right. All right. Well, have a great evening.
Thank you,
Laura.
so
much. All right,
really
we'll be in
appreciate
touch
it
on Instagram. Okay, bye.